Great. I'm going to get started. Allison, do you mind taking a peek at the waiting room just in case anyone pops in while I am? It's okay if you can't do.
Got it.
Now your screen's shared.
It showed up. I let someone in.
Oh, great. Amazing. Thank you. Just give me 1 second. Seems. Okay. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Ellie Garrity, and I'm the Director of Alumni Career Programs for the University of Maryland Alumni Association. I'm so excited that you're able to join us for today's webinar, Get Out of Your Own Way with Alison Carty. This webinar is presented in partnership with the Coaches Corner program, the UMD Alumni Association's newest professional development resource accessible to all Terps. I'll tell you a little bit more about it later. We have a lot of information to cover today, but we will take questions throughout the webinar, so feel free to submit any of those questions using the chat function that I know you all are probably familiar with at the bottom of your Zoom panel. This webinar is being recorded, so by participating, you acknowledge and consent to your image, likeness, or voice being recorded. And then speaking of recording, a recording of today's webinar will be available and shared with you following today's session, so you can be all up to date with all of Allison's wisdom that she drops today. And you can also access our closed captioning feature by clicking the CC button on your Zoom panel. Okay, so a little bit about our presenter and Terp today. Alison Carty is a career truth teller who believes in living a life that actually feels like your own. She runs a career coaching team that has helped over 300 capable professionals find a great career fit through her proven clarity process. She also works one-on-one with entrepreneurs and executives who secretly want to burn down everything they've built and aren't sure why. Alison is the author of the bestseller Career Grace, How to Get Unstuck and Pivot Your Career, and her work has been featured on Monster, Forbes, The Muse, Undercover, Recruiter, and The Washington Post. All right, Alison, I will pass it off to you to get things started.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ellie, and so good to be with all of you today. I'm super excited to share and speak on this topic, and I also want to give a big shout out to Ellie and all the work that she does on Coaches Corner, where she's bringing experienced professional coaches to share with the Terp community and also facilitate connections. So thank you, Ellie, for all the work that you do to make this happen today. So today we're going to be talking about getting out of your way around making a career change, where you're wanting that change, but you're feeling stuck and you're not really sure what's happening or how to make things better. This topic is my expertise and something that I love to talk about. I was actually just sharing with Ellie before we started today that I got to work with one of our amazing Terp alumni recently who had taken a gap time in her career and then was getting back into it, but was kind of feeling like, I'm not sure what I want to be doing or where to focus my attention. And through working together, we were able to help her get clear on the type of work she wanted to do. And then happily, she has now landed a job in that work. So a big thing that I want to do as we're talking today is give you some hope. I know that it is frustrating and annoying when you want to make a change, but you're not really able to figure out what steps you need to take, or it just seems like time is passing by. So I hope as we talk that we can engage some in the chat. And the first thing I would ask is, are you guys ready to get started? If you want to put a yes in the chat, I appreciate you being here today, and that will just get everybody oriented to the chat feature. Ooh, I like the thumbs up as well. So just Ellie did a wonderful job with an introduction, but just to give you a little more background about myself and why listen to me is I was somebody who graduated from the University of Maryland in 2006 with an accounting degree, but unfortunately, I don't really like either details or arbitrary rules. So accounting was not a great fit for me. It was something that my parents recommended for me. My mom had made a career change from being a teacher to an accountant. So I think my parents figured, well, we have solved the careers for women in this family. Just go be an accountant yourself. And I really remember how painful it was to feel like I wasn't in the right place for me, but to not know what would feel better. And particularly, I remember that sense of concern and worry about will I get onto a career path that is a better match for me? It did get a lot better. I was reviewing like an old notebook a couple months ago at this point, and I had this journal entry like, I hate everything. I really didn't like my work. I didn't really see a way out. And I'm happy to report that certainly there are good days and bad days, but by and large, I really love the work that I do now. And I've also seen so many clients be able to make improvements in their career so that they're getting more of what they want from the work that they're doing. So I've run a career coaching firm since 2009. So it has been about 13 years. As Ellie mentioned, we've worked with a couple hundred clients to help them get career clarity. And also a big thing that we support professionals with is getting unstuck, which is the worst feeling when you want to make a change, but you can't quite get a handle on it or get it started or get it going. So what we're going to do today is break down what's happening when you're getting stuck and really take it step by step so that you can understand and then address the situation more effectively. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that initial impetus for wanting to make a change. And I do want to acknowledge that sometimes changes are things that we are seeking, and sometimes they are things that are kind of thrust upon us, like a mix up or restructuring at a corporate level and your job gets eliminated, or you wind up in a situation where it's just not a good fit and you're getting let go. So sometimes there are situations where it's like, well, I need to make a change because what I was doing is no longer viable. So I get that. And then there are also times when we want to make a change because of some type of internal driver. And I'm curious, as you all feel comfortable, to put in the chat, what was that first kind of signal that something was off or that you needed or wanted to make a change? And I'm going to share some of the things that I see a lot in clients, and I'd love to get your responses as well. So some of the ways we see something is off is when, as we're interviewing, we see red flags about a situation, but we move forward anyway. So I've had clients who have said, I knew even before I took this job that something wasn't quite right about it. It could be that the role isn't what you thought. So you thought you were going to get to do a certain type of work, but then when you get in there, it's something quite different. It could be that you really liked one role that you were doing, but then it changed as time has gone on. It could be that you outgrow a role. So maybe it's something where you liked what you were doing and you want to continue to progress, but there's not really an opportunity to do it. I see a lot of times like a management change or a restructuring can really put a wrinkle in. I liked the old corporate culture or work environment, but this new one is not a fit for me and maybe doesn't resonate with my values. It can also be just a persistent feeling of unhappiness. So I think some people put in the chats, I want to just see what you all said. Anthony said it's seeing a prototype of a better way of doing things. Interesting. So yeah, sometimes that spark of jealousy can be instructive of like, oh, I wish I had something like this other person has. I'm not sure if that's quite what you meant, Anthony, but certainly seeing there might be a better way. Kelly says, still figuring out if I need a change, internal or external. And I think that's really valid, of trying to understand if you can salvage or make work the environment you're in, or if it needs to be something that you leave. Lack of fulfillment can certainly be something that triggers this. And then a couple of things, management change, the role didn't grow as originally expected. Definitely, I see that all the time, Diana. I had a job that I really liked, but we were doing less and less of that and more business paperwork, the dreaded paperwork. I'm sorry, hopefully this will stop in a sec. Reaching a plateau and no longer learning, feeling bored, stuck, stagnant. Yeah, I just want to validate all of these, that these are really signals that are the beginning part of thinking, okay, maybe I want to make a change here. And that sense that something is off or could be better. So I really appreciate y'all sharing these different ideas. And I think we already started to note some of the signs that you're feeling unhappy in your current job as well. Carmen says, management changes leading to worse environment and feeling that you're no longer valued. That is the worst. I think so many of us have that experience of not feeling valued, and that can be really problematic. Feeling bored, not using my strongest skills, no growth. Yeah, so the signals that you all are already starting to name, and I had called out some as well, are things like, are just signs that you're feeling unhappy in your current work environment, or things like living for the weekend, weekends feel too short. You might be experiencing on one end of the spectrum, boredom, as like Jennifer said, or on the other end of the spectrum, completely burnt out and just over it. Sometimes I see people who are in a place where they are so burnt out that the question of quitting is really prevalent on their mind on a daily, if not weekly basis, of like just wanting to get out of a particular situation. That can also happen if you're in a toxic work environment. I think somebody mentioned, and I'll just echo, not feeling fulfilled, wanting more meaning, not feeling challenged, not having room for growth, the work not being a match for who you are, the work being out of alignment with your values. So if there's anything else you have noticed, I think it's important to acknowledge these signs that something is off, because in doing so, it really gives us the ability to start to work with it and potentially change it for the better. And too often, I think what can happen is we don't recognize the importance of those feelings and experiences that we're having. So I really want to just hold them up and say, if you are feeling bored, if you're feeling stuck, stagnant, like you're no longer learning, if the role is changing, lack of fulfillment, all of those things are really important to pay attention to. When I talk to people who are interested in career coaching, I'm always noticing like, okay, so there are some real signals here that something is off, that something could be better. So I think you did a great job in noticing those. So the next thing I want to check in on is what are the impacts of being in an ill-fitting job? And I think this is something that's pretty intuitive, but also important to call out. So I'm curious, how does having a job where you're feeling bored or not feeling fulfilled, how does that impact the rest of your life? And you can put some things into the chat. How does it play into maybe how you feel about yourself, how you show up for your friends and loved ones, your energy level, your health? What things have you noticed about how being in an ill-fitting job or being in a work situation that isn't a good fit for you, how that impacts you? They're starting to come in. Thank you, Jennifer. Exhaustion, negativity, lack of motivation, for sure. I think that I can speak to all of these. The exhaustion is a real thing. I'm just feeling drained at the end of the day or at the end of the week. And then lack of motivation. One of the signs that I see sometimes is people who generally want to be doing a good job or who have like high performer type mentality, they start to notice that they don't really want to do that anymore, that they're kind of feeling over it, and that is unusual for them to be having that low motivation or like kind of lack of caring feeling. Yes. And then negativity, for sure. If you aren't feeling great about your work, then you can feel negative about other things as well. Any other things y'all have noticed about impacts of an ill-fitting job before I go on? I'll just give it a couple seconds. Diana says, I actually try to leave it at work and not impact others around me, but I find myself working harder to try to make it work and misplacing that energy that could be spent. Yeah. Interesting. I think that's fair. Like how much energy is taking to manage the discomfort or the dissatisfaction of work. I get that, Diana. And Candace, coming back from the pandemic with all the extra stuff going on at home just made everything feel like it was going to implode. Yeah, that's something I'm really glad you brought up, Candace, that we have all just been through a very unusual couple of years, and how wide-reaching the impacts of that have been as well on our the norms around work and how we feel about maybe going back to office. So there's a lot in the air about the pandemic. Okay. On the flip side, what do you think are the impacts of having a great job? So how does your life, how do the different elements of your life react, or how are they affected when you have a job where you're feeling engaged and motivated and in alignment with that work? And if you've ever had a job like that, I'd be curious to put that in the chat, because sometimes it can be nice to hear that this does exist, that people can feel good about their career. Candace says, eager to come in. Diana says, it doesn't feel like work, it's fulfilling. I think that's really true. I think one of the things about having a great job is just our intrinsic engagement and motivation can be at a really different place. Jennifer says, I feel like I have more energy for life. I eat better, exercise, and I'm just more fun to be around. Oh, I haven't had a job like that in a long time. It's good that you know that that exists if you have had that before. Like I said, that's a really nice touchstone. So yeah, the reason I wanted to just notice the impacts is because the work that we do, while it is contained to the workday, and perhaps we're trying to contain it to the workday, it does spread, and it does impact a lot of different areas. Everything from relationships to health to self-confidence is a really big one, and just to like overall attitude about life. Okay, so this topic is about when you are wanting to make a change, and it sounds like based on some of the ideas that are in the chat, there is some desire to make a change, to get to something better, but you are feeling stuck. And one of the things that I see a lot is time can keep passing. So this can look like maybe you had a mental deadline in your head, like I'm going to be gone before this next big project, or I'm going to be gone by the end of the year. And sometimes what can happen is like calendar pages keep getting torn off, or you hit a milestone that you weren't really expecting to hit. Like I thought I would be gone before my 10-year milestone. So there's just this kind of overall feeling of not being happy, but having trouble making a move. So I'm curious if any of you relate to that, to a sense of time passing, and the way that you could think about that, and just how long have you been wanting to make a change, and just to notice, and if you feel comfortable putting in the chat. Sometimes it's short, it's a couple months. Sometimes it can be quite a while. I've worked with clients who have wanted to make a change for a decade or more, and we're feeling really stuck with it. So I'd be curious if anyone wants to put in the chat. And if there has been time passing, I just want you to know you're not alone. It's really common. You're not doing anything wrong. I'm going to go into next just some causes of what can keep us stuck, so you can start to understand. And I think it's important to notice that kind of time element. Yeah, a year to 8-ish years. Kelvin, for sure, time goes by, thought it would be easier to make a change. Kelvin, that's a great segue to what I wanted to talk about next, because there are some core causes that make a career change inherently difficult. So one of the main ones is just our human resistance to change and desire for stability, right? So we all want things to be predictable. We want to have a sense of control in our world, a sense of familiarity. One example of this that you may relate to is at the beginning of the pandemic, nobody wanted to go home, and now nobody wants to go back, right? Like whatever it is that we're doing, we do have that preference for if it could just stay the same. So that's human, to be somewhat resistant to change. Another thing that can happen, particularly around internally driven career changes, is that there isn't any external accountability. So if you think about all the things that you do at work, there are people who are expecting you to do those things you do with family or friends, there are people around, but the person who is really most affected by you making a career change or getting it done is you. And I think that being alone with that accountability for it can make it feel less of a priority. For many people, sometimes our own voice or our own needs can take a lower rung to all the louder, more vocal needs of those around us. So that's another reason. And as I'm noting these, if any of them resonate, I'd love to hear in the chat. Another reason why you might get stuck is if you aren't clear on where to go next, it's really hard to move. So if you're feeling uncertain about what would be a better fit for you, then you don't really have a target, so it's hard to hit it. And what can happen is you just stay where you are. Another thing is our careers are easy to put on the back burner. They have a rhythm to them, and we just kind of get into that routine of going to work, showing up, doing what we need to do. And in the midst of the rest of life, of ups and downs, of responsibilities we have outside of work, fun we have outside of work. And so making a change in our career can very frequently shift to the back burner. Sometimes I'll talk with people who are interested in making a change, and I wind up talking with them like a year or two later, and they're still interested, but nothing has happened. And it's really through no fault. It's just like life happens. We all get busy, and the change in our career can get put on the back burner. And then I'll also note, for most people, job searching is not our favorite thing in the world, right? I would imagine many of you can relate to this, that I've definitely heard people where even updating their resume can feel like a chore, or they have a lot of resistance to it or anxiety around it. So just that the task itself is like not the most fun thing to do can be a reason why we put it off. And then lastly, one of the things, and it's really a nod to your strength and resilience, that ability to hold on, that ability to stick with it, the ability to keep showing up and like be responsible for your work. It's actually a strength that you have to be able to do that, but it can be at odds with making a change. So I'm just noting some of the chat. Yes, Jennifer says not clear on where to go next. Diana, that's mine. Resume task work is slowing me down. Diana, so many people that I talk to, the resume task is like this behemoth for them. And psychologically, it can be a really big deal. So you're not alone with that. I'm also curious how people feel about being in that stuck place. If you want to put in the chat, like what is your sense of it? Are you frustrated? Are you impatient? I'm just curious. Or are you comfortable? Sometimes that can happen where people are in a situation where it's not so bad that they really are kind of pushed to make a change. They just feel comfortable, but they might want something better. So I'd be curious if anyone wants to share. All right, so to move into the ways to get out of your way and the things to be cognizant of, we're going to talk about 5 missteps. Sorry, these went out of order, but that's okay. 5 missteps that can happen as you're trying to make a change. And I'll just note there is some of the feelings. I was giving people a chance to write those in: frustrated, worried I won't find a better fit. I think that's a big one that people feel of, am I just thinking the grass is greener, or will it actually be greener? Is there something better for me, or is this all there is? And one of the things that I see that frequently happens, particularly when we've been in one job or industry for a long time, is that becomes like our whole conceptualization of work. And even though it's just one of so many, I don't know, millions, more than millions of work environments and jobs that are out there in the world, our field of focus narrows, and we just see that as what work is, and kind of can have blinders to the sense of what else is out there for us. So to move on to the 5, yes, normalization, thank you, Anthony. To move on to the 5 missteps that I see that are really common that contribute to keeping us stuck beyond just the regular old human resistance to change are: 1, worrying what everyone else will think. So I have a client story I'll share in a little bit where this client really wanted to make a change into a new field, and he would bring it up. He was actually kind of mid-career, so not super young, but he would bring it up to his mother to kind of like test the waters of, oh, you know, I'm thinking about this thing. What do you think? And his mom didn't like it. And so she would shoot it down, and he would be like, oh, okay, you know, maybe that's not the thing that I want to do. And he was caught in that cycle for a long time of like floating that idea, getting it shot down, then feeling confused about what he wanted to do. So worrying what everyone else will think is a human thing to do, but I would just encourage you to remember that it's your career, and you really have the best access to the knowledge of what's inside of you, what you're wanting to do in the world, what you value. And it's really important to tap into that. Similar to that story I just shared, following other people's agendas. So this is something that can be kind of subtle, but it's when we have a sense of the right thing to do, or society expects me to do a certain thing, or maybe the people around us really want us to behave in a certain way. So I had one client, I'm in the DC area, and you all are Maryland grads, so I think you get the DC area vibe around career. And I had a client one time who really was just a gentle soul, wanted to be like by himself, doing some type of, I think he really wanted to do wood carving type things. And he felt such a challenge to own that about himself and to recognize that that was what was true for him. Because in the DC area, he felt, well, it's important to have a high-powered career, people only are valuable if we do a certain type of work in the world. And that's really when we're following other people's agendas instead of listening to what's true for us. And as I'm going through things, if you all notice any of these or can relate to them, as always, I'd love to hear in the chat. And then the next one is thinking and taking no action. I apologize, that ring will stop in just a sec. So this is one that I see all the time, particularly with smart people. And it's tricky because we see a problem, our brain is doing the best that it can to solve that problem. And in doing so, it gets really wrapped up in its own thought process and can get like wrapped around the axle around everything. So this can look like if you're thinking about your challenge in your career and thinking about what you're going to do next, like 24/7, if it's something that weighs on you really heavily, if you find yourself trying to like perfectly plot out the next 20 years of your career and get it all secure and set before taking any action, it's something where in so much of our work and in so much of our education, thinking is rewarded and valuable. But in this particular problem, when we get stuck in overthinking, when we're trying to solve the problem of what we want to do next within the limits of what we know right now and don't give ourselves room to expand those limits, it can keep us really stuck. So I'm curious on that one in particular, if people can relate to that kind of churning type of thinking. And I've certainly experienced it before too, where my brain is like a dog with a bone, like I want to get this solved, but I'm just like fatiguing myself and unable to really come to a conclusion or a new understanding. Yeah, Jennifer says yes. It is very common. Ian, definitely. Yeah. So, and that one's, again, just to reiterate, we're trying to be productive. Our brain is trying to be helpful, and it's also really trying to protect us. Like all of that thinking and getting caught in it is in some ways a protective mechanism of, well, if I talk myself out of making any change here, and here is pretty safe, I may not like it, but it's pretty safe, then I won't make a change and get hurt in some way. So it's also a protective mechanism is what's happening. Another misstep that can happen is not reducing your fear. So anytime that we are thinking about making a change, it is normal to have some fear around making that change. And we naturally have fear of the unknown. We naturally are, I think Jennifer said, worried when we don't know how it's going to turn out. So one of the things that we do in career coaching is work to reduce some of that fear by getting more information and like peeking around the corner in some ways before asking yourself to make a huge leap, because that's really scary. So the more that we can fill in the gaps in your brain about what's out there, what it's going to be like, the easier it is to take action. And then lastly, a misstep that I think that can happen is going it alone. And for all the reasons that I said before of how easy this is to put on the back burner and how common it is for time to pass and a change not to happen, even though you want one, a lot of why that's happening is because there isn't support and structure around you. So those are the 5 missteps that I see happening a lot. And again, I just want to reiterate, there's nothing wrong with you if you're doing these things. They're completely human. And this particular problem is one that benefits a lot from having a different approach. Okay, so what I want to show you now, and I'm actually going to stop the PowerPoint briefly to show you some stories. Is that showing up, Ellie? I see you nodding. Okay, thank you. Let me pull the chat up so I can make sure if anyone's commenting. All right, so I just want to give some inspiration around what is possible, because I think that when you're feeling stuck, you can have the sense like this may never change. I may be stuck here forever. And I don't think that's the case. I do think that it is possible to make an improvement and get things to a better place. So I'm going to run through a couple client stories just so that I hope, kind of like Anthony said earlier, like you can get that prototype like, oh, perhaps if they did this, I can do it too, because I believe all of you are capable of making that change that you want to make. So the first story is one of our clients, Andrea, who was having that exact issue that I believe it was Diana was talking about with her resume and also her sense of confidence. She had been in a situation, let me go back. She had been in a situation where frequently when we're not in a great environment, it can take a toll on our confidence. So she was being like, what's happening? I'm having trouble getting clear on what I want to do next. And she was able to have a huge epiphany, get refocused, and land a great new job that was a better match for her. Russell is actually the client that I mentioned who kept flagging something for his mom. So he says, my life has completely changed. I know who I am and I have a plan of action. I'm light years ahead of where I was 10 months ago. And somebody who not honoring what he really wanted to be doing was impacting his health. I believe he went from pre-diabetic before our program to once he moved into honoring what he really wanted to do, that cleared up and his health improved a lot. So definitely changing careers impacts a lot of things. We've also had clients who have been able to launch a business. So Beth says, through coaching, I got the confidence to create my own future and launch my business, which is having a lot of fun, doing the things that bring me joy and going for fulfillment. Life is short, live it fully. So this is something where I always tell clients, we don't have an agenda about what you do. Like we want you to find the thing that's right for you. So you're going to see people have different directions that they go in. And I think that's really an important distinction because some services like tout one thing as the answer, like everybody should start a business. And I don't think that's true. I think whatever it is needs to be true for you. This is a fun one. We had a client, Kay, who got paid to travel the world. She was one of those people who love travel, and she was able to move, travel the world, get a new job, and grow. And she said that it changed everything. So that's a fun story. And one other, this is Amber's story. She had worked in, she was working with luxury brands, and she had a real passion for wine. And she moved from working in luxury brands to bringing that knowledge base into a small business arena, and she was able to merge her hobby and professional interests. She says, changing careers has impacted my life in such a positive way. And then the other one, if I can click correctly, we have a bunch. Just to someone's point about not knowing where they want to be going, Mason's story really speaks to that. They say, I know what I want. I was unhappy at my job and throwing darts in about 25 different directions, unsure of where to go and what the right next step was. And Mason was also somebody who was able to identify what they wanted and land that next job that wound up being a tremendously better fit for them. So those are just some stories, and we have a bunch more. If you ever want to get inspired that you can make a change, you can look at these more closely. And just to recognize that all of these people are professionals like you, they're capable like you, and if they can do it, you can definitely do it as well. So I have one last point before we go into questions. I'm gonna stop this share and bring up my slides again. Give me one sec for that. Okay, so there are a couple of things that I have seen really help people as they're trying to get unstuck. The first is making a commitment. So anything that you do that is signaling, this is important to me, this is something that I want to prioritize, that moves it from that back burner kind of low burn state to like front and center, can be really helpful to your success and getting unstuck and getting out of your way. Another thing is being able to work inside of a structure that helps you to take things step by step. So making a change like this can feel really overwhelming, but when you have a process that you can follow and you just take it one step at a time and you know, okay, this week, this is what I'm doing, and like chunks it down into smaller pieces, then it becomes a lot easier. So that's one of the things that our coaching programs really help with, is putting that structure around what can feel very fuzzy so that you can make consistent progress toward your goals. Also, accountability. So this could be within a coaching program, this could be with a friend. It's just having somebody else who cares about what's happening. Because like I said, this can be a problem that is very personal. So having that external accountability for some people can really be a benefit to make sure you are taking the steps you need to take. Also, expert guidance. So our career coaching team, we have, all my coaches have been working with me for at least 4 years, and they have worked and seen a wide variety of cases and been able to help with those. So one of the things that I like to say is, for you, this is like, you know, a once or maybe 2 or 3 times in a lifetime problem. So it's a little foreign to you. But for us, this is a problem that we work through and guide people through every day. So just having that expertise by your side can be really reassuring. And also we can point out places where a new perspective could be helpful, or a different way of handling things could work. And we can also reflect back what is amazing about you that is different than everybody else. I had a client recently who she just loves like getting into and understanding other people's points of view, like immersing herself in it. And I was able to tell her, like, this is something very unique to you. I don't know that I've ever had a client who loves this much. So that can be really helpful. And then also having a neutral third-party sounding board. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier that can keep us stuck is other people's projections or agendas about what we should do. I always say we care about all of our clients, but we don't really care what you do. And sometimes just having that neutrality and distance and like a clean reflection can be really helpful. And then lastly, being able to clarify your strengths and target can help you get unstuck so much better. Mason's story mentioned like feeling like they were throwing darts in 25 directions. I think that can often be a place where people get stuck, is they want to make a change, so they just try all the different things. But when we can really narrow in on what are your strengths and what's a good target that matches those strengths, then you have one dartboard that you're aiming at. Your likelihood of hitting it goes up because all of your effort can be focused in that one direction. So that is what I have for today about getting out of your own way. I hope it's helped to break down some of what's happening so it doesn't feel as overwhelming. I'm going to put in the chat both my LinkedIn and my email. So if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you're more than welcome to, or if you want to shoot me a note about more of what's happening, I'd love to hear from you. Also with our programs, we have an application process. If you put in that you're a Terp, I'm going to pass you through that you came to this webinar, but it just gives us an opportunity to learn a little bit more about what your specific situation is, and then we'll be able to set up a time to talk that through in more detail and get you set up with a good coaching program for you. I will note that part of Coach's Corner is all Terps get a 10% discount on our coaching programs. So that's one special benefit that Ellie has gotten for all of you. So what, if any, questions do you all have that I can help you with? And thank you for your attention. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'll wait while people are probably chatting in on their keyboards. questions, but one that I have for you that I like to ask a lot of coaches is, especially folks who are kind of stuck in this space. Do you ever work with clients to kind of quote unquote fix what's happening in their environment, or do you feel like 90 to 100% of your clients often just need to get out of what they're currently in?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we have certainly had clients who wind up staying. Like that's part of us not having an agenda is they're able to figure out, oh, here's what needs to change, or I really like this company, but I should be in a different role. In general, we're helping people with a bigger change, but I've seen it all. One other note I'll make about this question I think is really important is I have a colleague, her name is Meredith Hawley, who works in cases of toxicity and even harassment. And in those situations, it can be helpful to be able to learn the skills to curb that in your current work environment, because it may be something that happens later as well. So we don't have the training to do that. We're really more focused on if you just don't like what you're doing, but you're not sure what you want to do next, then we can help with that. But I do think that's something to be aware of. If you like what you're doing, but you don't like the environment that you're in, or there's poor behavior from the people around you, then learning about those power dynamics and how to shift those can be really empowering.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. I'm glad you brought that piece up too. Another question is around the time frame. I think this is unfair to ask you, but for those folks who are on this call thinking, I'm ready to take my first step, or I want to try to get unstuck and get out of my own way. Do you have kind of a time frame in which you say usually it takes clients to really figure out their next step? I know you mentioned working with someone who said over 10 months, I see night and day after 10 months, but is it fair to kind of say what a time frame would be?
Yeah, great question. So our programs typically run 1 to 3 months, and they're really focused on getting that initial clarity down. So for example, I'm pretty sure in that story with 10 months, we worked with Russell for 3 months and laid a lot of groundwork. And then he kept going and he's like, oh, okay, here's where I am 10 months later. And so that clarity piece we can get in a couple months. But then I have no promises about how long it will take for the real world piece of making that happen. We have some clients who get that done in the context of their program. Sometimes it happens with patients a little bit after. And sometimes it takes longer. I have had clients who, actually thinking of one client who she figured out what she wanted. I think she figured out what she wanted, was making great progress towards it. The pandemic hit. She was like, kind of as we all went, So I just heard from her, I'm not perfect on the timeline, but I believe it was earlier this year. So that was a multi-year thing where then she was able to pick it back up and was able to make that transition and also a move with that transition. But it can take a while. I do think that there's something to doing what you can when you can. So if you're struggling with the clarity, then getting in a coaching program to get that started is going to set you up for more success than not doing that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's helpful to know that the clarity process has maybe a more structured time frame around it, but then it really differs from individual to individual how the implementation of that clarity goes.
Yeah, job searches can be different beasts. And sometimes people get really close to what they want, but they're like number 2 and they don't get the job. And you all know the roller coaster that job searching is. So,
yeah.
But I also do see people get it. We had a client recently who went through one of those like grueling job searches, and we kept in touch as he was doing it. And he stuck with it more, rock star. He stuck with it, kept up with his networking, kept holding on to what he wanted, and was eventually able to land a job that fit what he wanted. But my heart was breaking the whole time because he wanted it faster, and sometimes it doesn't go faster.
Yeah, well, this is a good segue because Adam just wrote in about kind of a job search, and I can read this to you. Right now, one of his biggest obstacles is hearing back from jobs in his current line of work that he applied to and he knows he's qualified for. It leaves him frustrated, and he's wondering about change for the future. But then, his question to himself is, if I can't get interviews in my current line of work, how would a career change go any differently when I don't have any prior experience in that field?
Yeah,
it's a tough one.
I have an answer. But great question, Adam, and thank you for sharing that. So with job searching, one of the things that any career coach will tell you, but it definitely bears repeating, is online job searches have one of the lowest percentage yields of any type of job search. So my hunch, without knowing all the details, Adam, is if you are shooting off resumes in a cold fashion, like just putting in applications and not hearing back, that may be completely normal and nothing personal to what you're doing or your value add or your ability to get a new job. So one of the things to think about in job searching is not that you don't want to do those online applications. We've certainly had clients who get jobs that way, but I'd really encourage you to add networking to your job searching strategy, because you as a person, you in 3D, your face is so much more compelling than a piece of paper and so much more distinguishable than one of 100 or more applications. So one of the techniques that I encourage is informational interviewing, which is different than hello, I would like a job. Informational interviewing is more like, hello, I'm curious to learn what it's like to work at blank. I'd love to learn from your experience. And that's a gentler open. And many times people don't feel comfortable saying like, responding to, I need a job, but they're happy to connect with you, to share a little bit more. So some of it may be your job search strategy, and that will likely improve your odds. So I believe it may be more a strategy question than a complete inability. And I would also question how many applications you're putting out, because it can feel like crushing how much time it takes to put in one. But like if you've put in just a few and are feeling like, well, there's nothing out there for me, it may also be a numbers game.
Yeah. And I would say with your strategy too, I mean, it might even benefit him to, be having these informational interviews anyways in a new field, right? That's the only way he's going to get to know the new field. So
yeah, informational interviews is a great strategy because it both reduces that fear of the unknown and it builds your network to help you with the job search. We had a client recently. This was an anomaly, but he had 2 informational interviews that connected him to hiring managers that gave him interviews. It's like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I feel like I hear stories like that all the time. How the power of the informational interview. That's great. So a couple more questions. We got a little follow-up from Adam. So I just want to read that to close the loop. Thank you. A lot of what I needed to hear. Put out more than 100 applications since leaving my last job. Wow. Crushing is a good word for it. Yeah. Gonna work on my networking a lot more. Awesome. That's great.
Yeah, and if I may,
sure.
Adam, informational interviewing is great. Also, involvement with professional organizations can be a way to boost your network. And it's completely understandable if you feel crushed and your self-confidence has taken a hit, and nobody can actually judge your worth based on a piece of paper. You are worthwhile, you can do a great job. So really, as much as you can, hold that and keep going. I think you can do it.
Yeah, that's a great message. Okay, 2 more quick questions. One from Diana. In addition to getting your clients unstuck, do you also help folks find new roles? Just find new general job opportunities?
Yeah, so we are more on the soul search side of things rather than the job search. We do support our clients some on the job search, but our program structure is really meant to get you that clarity piece. We're not a resume writing service or a headhunter, so we don't do placements, but we will if a client requests a review of a resume. Our goal is to support our clients, so we include that whenever anybody asks for it. But our specialty is really on the getting unstuck, the getting clear, so that you can get where you want to be going.
Great. And another kind of clarifying question here is, your coaching industry agnostic, or do you deal only with for-profit or nonprofit?
I like that, coaching industry agnostic.
I know.
I've never heard that term before, but I might borrow it. We work across industries. So our specialty is not being an encyclopedia of knowing every job or every industry. Our specialty is being experts in the process of this human change. And we've helped people in for-profit, nonprofit, government, higher education, you name it. We work with somebody in it.
Great. Amazing. Well, I feel like that's a great place to end. I think we got to every question here, and if you all could just help me give Alison a virtual round of applause. And thank you so much, Alison, for sharing your wisdom. I recommend, if you're looking for a coach, definitely check out all of our coaches on the Coaches Corner webpage, which I'll include in my follow-up email. And if Alison seems like a great fit, definitely connect with her. I know she's worked with lots of Terps and have really helped them get to where they want to be and get unstuck. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope we see you at the next Coaches Corner webinar. Alison, anything you want to say before we do our final sign off?
I just want to say thank you everyone for your participation. It was great to be with you on this hour and sending so many good vibes and encouragement on your career journey. If we can be of help, just reach out.
Hello.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone. Have a good rest of your day, and we will see you soon. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,